Hello, and welcome back to Knowledge on the Go Wit and Wisdom virtual lessons. As you know, my name is Mary Lou Lopez, and I'm one of your teachers for this virtual lesson experience. Today, I'm excited to continue our learning with Part 1, Lesson 4 of Grade 5, Module 4, Breaking Barriers. In the last lesson, we read the rest of the short story, Raymond's Run, and learned how Squeaky's perspective changes toward her brother Raymond and her rival Gretchen by the end of the May Day race. We gathered evidence to support the change in perspective of Squeaky in your preparation for the first module assessment. Focusing question task 1, which you will be completing in part 2 of this lesson. Before we get started, let's make sure we have all the materials you need. For this lesson, you will need a pencil or something to write with, your journal, and handout 2B, Raymond's Run. Remember, you can always access handout 2B, which has a copy of our text, Raymond's Run, under the student downloads beneath the lessons video on the Knowledge on the Go page on Great Minds website. If you don't have access to the handout, don't worry. That's okay. I will read aloud part of the story during our lesson, and you can replay it as needed. Go ahead and pause the video now if you need to get any materials and get yourself organized for learning. In our first learning arc, we have been thinking deeply about how sports have the power to affect the way we view others. In part 2 of lesson 4, the final lesson in this first arc, you will have a chance to demonstrate what you've learned by completing focusing task question 1. Remember that all of our lessons have a content framing question that provides the lens for our study in the text of our lesson. In the previous reveal lesson, we zoomed out to look closely at Squeaky's views of other characters and how her perspective has changed in the story. In this lesson, we are going to zoom in, and we will distill the essential meaning of Raymond's Run and consider how the text and its learning arc, Raymond's Run, and the Nelson Mandela documentary from Lesson 1 build our knowledge about the power of sports. Let's get started. Take a moment to read out loud these definitions of theme. Listen as I read the definitions out loud. 1. The central message of a literary work. 2. An idea developed in a text that conveys a message or truth about life and the human experience. Great stories contain deeper meanings and messages that apply not just to the story's characters, but to readers as well. When we think about themes in the stories we read, reading becomes a richer experience and can reveal important ideas and truths. Remember to turn to the vocabulary page in your journal, pause the screen, and record the definition of theme. In part 1 of this lesson, we will think about themes in Raymond's Run. Remember, we can often find clues to a story's theme by paying close attention to what the main characters learn or how they change by the end of the story. You've already done a lot of great thinking in the previous lesson about how Squeaky's views change by the end of Raymond's Run. Let's reread the final scene of Raymond's Run to jog our thinking about Squeaky's perspective change and how it offers clues to the story's theme. If you have handout 2B, turn to it now. Go ahead and reread paragraphs 24 and 25. Be sure to read with expression in a way that captures Squeaky's voice and personality. If you do not have handout 2B, don't worry. You can follow along as I read aloud the final 2 paragraphs. Whether you're reading independently or listening, consider these questions. In what way has Squeaky changed by the end of the story, especially in the way she views herself and others? What evidence best captures this change? So as you read or listen to me read, keep these 2 questions in mind. Paragraph 24 of Raymond's Run. In first place! The man on the loudspeaker is clear as a bell now, but then he pauses, and the loudspeaker starts to whine, then static, and I lean down to catch my breath, and here comes Gretchen, walking back, for she overshot the finish line too, huffing and puffing with her hands on her hips, taking it slow, breathing in steady time like a real pro, and I sort of like her a little for the first time. In first place! And then 3 or 4 voices get all mixed up on the loudspeaker, and I dig my sneaker into the grass and stare at Gretchen, who's staring back. We both wondering just who did win. I can hear old Beanstalk arguing with the man on the loudspeaker, and then a few others running their mouths about what the stopwatches say. Then I hear Raymond yanking at the fence to call me, and I wave to shush him, but he keeps rattling the fence like a gorilla in a cage, like in them gorilla movies. But then like a dancer or something, he starts climbing up nice and easy, but very fast. And it occurs to me, watching how smoothly he climbs hand over hand, and remembering how he looked running with his arms down to his side, and with the wind pulling his mouth back and his teeth showing, and all, it occurred to me that Raymond would make a very fine runner. Doesn't he always keep up with me on my trots? And he surely knows how to breathe in counts of 7, 'cause he's always doing it at the dinner table, which drives my brother George up the wall. And I'm smiling to beat the band, 'cause if I've lost this race, or if me and Gretchen tied, or even if I've won, I can always retire as a runner and begin a whole new career as a coach with Raymond as my champion. After all, with a little more study, I can beat Cynthia and her phony self at the spelling bee. And if I bugged my mother, I could get piano lessons and become a star. And I have a big rep as the baddest thing around. And I've got a room full of ribbons and medals and awards. But what has Raymond got to call his own? So I stand there with my new plans, laughing out loud by this time as Raymond jumps down from the fence and runs over with his teeth showing and his arms down to the side, which no one before him has quite mastered as a running style. And by the time he comes over, I'm jumping up and down, so glad to see him. My brother Raymond, a great runner in the family tradition. But of course, everyone thinks I'm jumping up and down because the men on the loudspeaker have finally gotten themselves together and compared notes and are announcing, "In first place, Miss Hazel Elizabeth Deborah Parker." Dig that! In second place, Miss Gretchen P. Lewis. And I look over at Gretchen, wondering what the P stands for. And I smile, 'cause she's good, no doubt about it. Maybe she'd like to help me coach Raymond. She obviously is serious about running, as any fool can see. And she nods to congratulate me. And then she smiles, and I smile. We stand there with this big smile of respect between us. It's about as real a smile as girls can do for each other, considering we don't practice real smiling every day, because maybe we too busy being flowers or fairies or strawberries instead of something honest and worthy of respect, like being people. I'm curious what lines may have stood out to you during this reading. To me, some of the lines that I saw was that he starts climbing up nice and easy, but very fast. As well as it occurs to me, watching how smoothly he climbs, hand over hand, and remembering how he looked running with his arms down to his side. How does this piece here stand out to you about Raymond? Also, that stood out to me was when Gretchen smiles and Squeaky Miles smiles back. What does this evidence show us about how Squeaky has changed and what she has learned about herself and others? Now that we've reread the end of the story and reflected on the ways in which Squeaky has changed, especially in the way she views others, we will think about how those ideas connect to broader themes or messages in Raymond's Run. Specifically, we will think about what Raymond's Run teaches us about the power of sports. Turn to a new blank page in your journal and write this question down in the center of the page and draw a box or circle around it. Take a moment to set up your page. In a moment, I'll ask you to pause the video and reflect on this question. What does Raymond's Run teach us about the power of sports? Jot down themes, draw lines off the center of the box, and create a separate box or circle for each of your ideas. I'll model one example to help you get started. I've been thinking about how running brings both Squeaky and Raymond and Squeaky and Gretchen together in this story. I think Squeaky is surprised by the connection she feels to both Raymond and Gretchen after the race. Running is like a bridge that leads Squeaky to a new understanding and connection with both of them. One theme I might record is sports can bring people together in an unexpected way. Remember, there is never just a single theme in a story. This is just one idea I had. What else does Raymond's Run teach us about the power of sports? Be sure you can point to evidence in the story to support your themes. If you get stuck, think back to what you noticed about how Squeaky changes in the story and what she learns about herself and others. Feel free to use the evidence organizer you created in your journal in Lesson 3 to help you articulate your theme. Go ahead and pause the video to reflect on broader themes in Raymond's Run. I'm sure you came up with some strong themes. Be sure to check your work, pause the video, reread the themes you wrote down, and ask yourself, What evidence from the text supports each theme? Now I'll share with you a few themes I thought of. Remember, I'm only sharing to generate discussion and give you an opportunity to compare your themes with someone else's, so you can think about whether you were thorough and based your themes on text evidence. Another theme I thought about is how people can find common ground through sports. At the beginning of the story, I think Squeaky sees more differences than similarities between herself and Gretchen. By the end of the race, Squeaky realizes that they share a love and talent for running. The smile between Squeaky and Gretchen represents common ground that they find in running. What other themes did you come up with? What is the most important theme or message you will take away from Raymond's run? Look back in your journal at your evidence organizer for Lesson 3 and the themes you generated in today's lesson. Then pause the video and take 2 or 3 minutes to complete a quick write in response to this question. What is the most important theme or message you will take away from Raymond's run? Remember, when we do a quick write, we write a brief response to reflect on and express our ideas. Don't worry about spelling or other conventions. Just focus on getting your ideas down. I wish we could share our thoughts about this question together in person. If you have a friend or family member, I encourage you to share with them the big ideas and themes you learned from reading Raymond's Run. To wrap up part 1, let's reflect on how the texts we've read so far, Raymond's Run by Toni Cade Bambara and Nelson Mandela documentary from Lesson 1, build our knowledge about the power of sports. As you may recall, in Lesson 1, we listened to a clip from the speech that Nelson Mandela, a former president of South Africa, delivered at the 2000 Laureus World Sports Award, a ceremony held each year to celebrate important achievements in sports around the world. Let's listen to his words again as we reflect on what we've learned.
Sport has the power to change the world. It has the power to inspire. It has the power to unite people in a way that little else does. It speaks to youth in a language they understand. Sport can create hope where once there was only despair.
What did you learn from watching the documentary about Nelson Mandela and South Africa's 1995 Rugby World Cup victory in Lesson 1? Take a moment to pause and think, what does that documentary teach us about the power of sports? Now take a minute to think about what you've learned over the last several lessons. Look through your journal at all the ideas and evidence you've recorded and the writing you have done. What knowledge of the world did you develop? What ideas did you ponder or think about? On a fresh page of your journal, write Knowledge Journal Entry, just as you did in the welcome module. Pause the video and take 4 to 5 minutes to respond to this prompt. How do the documentary about Nelson Mandela and the short story Raymond's Run build your knowledge about the power of sports, especially to help us see others in new ways? If possible, share some of your learning with a friend or family member. When we meet again for part 2 of this lesson, you will have a chance to review and strengthen evidence you've gathered of how Squeaky's views of Raymond and Gretchen change in the story. Then you will write a response to focusing question task 1. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us at info@greatminds.org. It was fun learning with you. Take care and see you next time.